Today we're going to dive into a really fascinating argument, one that looks at our entire existence as, well, a kind of high-stakes wager. It's a logical case for eternity, and it all kicks off with one powerful, simple image.
So picture this. Imagine your entire life, everything you've done, everything you will do, all your hopes, your fears, your career, your family, your 80 or so years on this planet. Imagine all of that fitting into a single, tiny speck of sand. It's finite. You can hold it, but it's incredibly small.
Okay, so if your life is that one little speck of sand, the argument then asks this really powerful question. What if eternity is an ocean? An endless, vast, immeasurable ocean? And that one question, that's the key to this whole line of thinking we're about to explore.
All right, let's dive into that, because you really have to get your head around this core analogy to see where the argument is going. We need to break down exactly what the speck and the ocean are supposed to represent.
So, on one side you have the speck. That's our day-to-day life, right? Our careers, our stuff, the things we worry about. It's all very real, but it's temporary. On the other side you have the ocean. This represents the big stuff, eternity, ultimate meaning, purpose, the infinite. And here's the first big idea. We spend almost all of our time, our energy, our passion on the speck, often without giving a single thought to the possibility that the ocean even exists.
And this quote just hits it home, doesn't it? It's used to really drive home how fleeting the speck is. A mist that shows up for a little while and then, poof, it's gone. It's a pretty stark image, and it's meant to contrast the temporary nature of our physical lives with the possibility of something so much bigger.
Okay, so we've got the metaphor down. Now we pivot to the actual logic of the argument. This part is framed kind of like a risk assessment, and it asks a really direct question. Is it actually a logical, rational move to completely ignore the possibility of the ocean?
And the whole argument really hinges on this number, just 1%. The idea is simple, even a tiny probability can have massive consequences, especially when the stakes are astronomically high. It's a principle we use all the time in other parts of our lives.
And here it is. This is the illustration used to make that abstract idea feel completely real. Let me ask you, would you board that plane? No way, right? Almost nobody would. A tiny 1% chance of total catastrophe is more than enough to change our behavior completely. We wouldn't just shrug and say, the odds are good, not when our life is on the line.
So here's the knockout punch of the argument. It takes that logic from the plane and applies it directly to God and eternity. It says, look, if an honest skeptic can admit there's even a 1% chance that an eternal reality is real, well then it's just not logical to give it 0% of your attention. The potential consequences are just too enormous to ignore.
This leads to a fascinating concept called the faith bet. The idea here, which is often tied to the thinker Tim Keller, is that nobody gets to sit this wager out. Saying there is no God isn't a neutral, safe position. No, it's an active bet. It's a massive leap of faith that this material world, the speck, is all there is. Every single worldview, whether you realize it or not, is a gamble on what's ultimately true.
Now this is where things get really interesting. The argument kind of flips the script. It shifts the burden of proof and suggests that maybe, just maybe, a worldview without the ocean of eternity has some really tough questions it needs to answer for itself.
And these are the questions it poses. I mean, think about it. If the speck is really all there is, then why do we have this deep, relentless craving for meaning and purpose? Why do we believe that justice and love are real things, not just survival instincts or chemical reactions in our brain? And what about this almost universal homing signal for something bigger, something higher, that you see across almost every culture in history? Where does that come from?
And this famous quote from C.S. Lewis is used to frame what's called the logic of desire. It's a simple idea. Just like feeling hungry points to the fact that food exists, and being thirsty points to the existence of water. This argument suggests that our deep, profound hunger for forever, for meaning that this world can't seem to satisfy, points to the existence of that other world, the ocean.
So, this brings us to the climax of the whole argument. After laying out the stakes of this huge gamble and the challenges of a purely material view, the source presents the Christian story as the proposed solution to the whole puzzle. But first, there's a warning. It points out the danger of betting everything you have on the speck. If you make finite things, your career, your money, your health, even your relationships, the absolute God of your life, the thing you live for, well, they're eventually going to break your heart. They have to.
because they're temporary, unstable foundations.
And this is where we get this brilliant illustration of the Christian solution. It's an analogy of an author. So imagine a great author creates a world full of characters. But those characters get themselves into a crisis they can't possibly solve on their own. What does the author do? The author writes himself into the story as a character, Jesus. And from within the story, he lives and dies to rescue them. The idea is that he enters our speck to give us a foundation in the ocean that can never, ever wash away.
And this verse is used to just wrap it all up, to summarize the ultimate stakes. The source material even inserts its own analogies right into the verse here, framing it as the final choice. What good is it to gain everything in the speck if it costs you the ocean? It brings the whole thing right back to that first choice we are presented with.
So we end right where we started, with a choice. This whole explainer isn't about proving anything with 100% certainty. It's about laying out a logical framework to make you think, to make you consider the odds, the desires of your own heart, and what your own worldview is really built on. And ultimately, it just leaves you with this one very powerful question. When it comes to the great gamble of your existence, where are you placing your bet? The speck or the ocean?